Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Jose Chapa, and I am the Florida Director of Civic Engagement and Organizing with Hispanic Federation, and I'm here on behalf of Yanitzi Velez, Director of Florida and the Southeast for Hispanic Federation. Thank you for joining us this evening. Hispanic Federation works on advocacy issues that align with its mission to inform and empower the Latino community in areas of economic empowerment. And joining us for this evening's virtual program are two leading advocates who will be speaking about Florida's affordable housing crisis and what legislative bill addresses this issue. This program is a continuation of our Facebook Live Cafecito conversation that we had on the 28th of January, where we were joined with panelists talking about the shortages of affordable housing, the new COVID-19 stimulus, addressing mental assistance, and the extension of the eviction moratorium. Tonight, we will talk about a specific trust fund that was enacted in 1992. It is known as the Sadowski Trust Act. We will learn the history of its inception, why we needed to create it, and how this trust fund has aided in creating affordable housing in Florida, and how we can continue to benefit from it. But before we continue, este programa está siendo simultáneamente traducido en español. Obviously, I don't speak Spanish well. Para escucharlo, llame al 407-777-2874. Again, for those who will be joining us tonight, we will have interpretation for our Spanish-speaking audience. The phone number is 407-777-2874 to join us in this conversation this evening. Now, I would like to introduce our featured speakers in tonight's panel discussion. Jamie Ross is the current CEO of the Florida Housing Coalition. The coalition is an organization that provides resources to leverage policies on quality, affordable housing. Jamie has an extended history of housing advocacy and created this coalition in 1992 that successfully advocated the William E. Sadowski Affordable Housing Act's passage, which provided a dedicated revenue source for affordable housing in Florida. She has authored numerous articles on the planning and financing of affordable housing and smart growth tools to produce and preserve affordable housing. Please, everyone, welcome Jamie Ross. Good evening, Jamie. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so honored to be here. I think my mic might have been muted when I just said
that.
I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for having me, Maria.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor for us as well. And you have such an impressive, such an extensive background. So we're really happy that you could join us this evening.
Absolutely.
Now, I wanted to also take a moment to, to also greet Commissioner Ortiz. He's our next featured guest. He is the Orlando Commissioner, Tony Ortiz. Commissioner Ortiz is the first and only Puerto Rican elected official to hold a position as Commissioner of the City of Orlando. Currently, as President of the Florida League of Cities, Commissioner Ortiz is leading a statewide initiative called Building Stronger Cities. And this initiative organizes, empowers, and delivers to help every resident learn the ways of government so that they will know what to expect from legislators and learn the legislation that this legislation should be based upon the needs of the people. Everyone, please welcome Commissioner Tony Ortiz.
Thank you. This is great to be with you guys. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you for the privilege and the honor of this opportunity to talk to the public.
Commissioner Ortiz, we're gonna start with you this evening. As president of the Florida League of Cities, what is the role of the Florida League of Cities addressing housing And what connection does it have with the Sadowski Trust Fund?
Well, first of all, the Florida League of Cities' main purpose is to defend home rule. And people are probably going to wonder, what is home rule? And to describe it in a simple way, is to safeguard your wishes in reference to the needs of your respective community and allow your local government to attend those needs without the interference of the state government. In other words, as Thomas Jefferson used to say, the government closest to the people know the people's best, and we are working. The Florida League of Cities makes sure that Tallahassee understands that there's legislations that should be left alone for the municipalities to handle. Sadowski, and we have the great privilege of having Mrs. Ross with us today. This was a great legislation that was passed in 1992, and so needed, because we have veterans, we have people, the working people out there, that they cannot always meet the demands of the market out there in order to afford a house or to rent an apartment or any of these things. So what we do at the Florida League of Cities is we make sure that when the municipalities are trying to advocate at the state level for those funds to be left alone, we go full force. We have about 2,270 local legislators, municipal officials, that we come together and we, not attack, but we overwhelm the legislature. We go advocating to make sure that those funds are left alone for us to be able to help our communities. Now, we have to understand that the way that goes is based, a lot of that funding, and I know that Mrs. Ross is going to explain more about this, 20 cents on the dollar from the tax, the tax from the dock stamps are applied for this of the state, and that money is then segregated. Around 70% of it is allocated around the state, principally to the counties and to the larger cities. Then that money gets divided in a 10% administrative, 65 for housing, buying houses or fixing houses, and then the other 20 to 25% is allocated also for people with disabilities, and in addition to also create facilities for those who are homeless. The problem we've been having in the past 5 years is that the legislature keeps taking on that funding and taking it for other purposes and for balancing their budget. And they are not paying attention to the great crisis we have in this nation, housing nation. And that's where the Florida League of Cities, we get involved heavily in terms of advocating in Tallahassee and working in combination with each one of the 411 municipalities of the state to make sure that those legislators are paying attention to the needs of the people locally.
Wow. So I would be remiss, and I definitely want to bring in Jamie into the conversation, because, I mean, she essentially was the creator of this trust fund. So Jamie, I wanted to circle back to you. Could you give the audience a bit of context?
Sure.
In terms of, why, specifically why this, why did you decide on creating this trust fund, its inception, your current role?
Sure,
in
absolutely.
the coalition, and just give us a little bit of context there for our audience.
Yes, Maria, and those are great, wonderful comments by Commissioner Ortiz. And being the president of the League of Cities, that's a humongous job. And
411 municipalities, he said. It's a heavy lift.
411, yeah. So there. First of all, I don't want to take too much credit here. So I'm basically the person who herded some cats, to be honest with you. I was actually practicing law in Orlando.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, a small world, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I went up to Tallahassee in the summer of 1991, I was the affordable housing director at a smart growth organization called 1,000 Friends of Florida. And I first thing I did, my job was to look at the housing elements of comprehensive plans, which is a little complicated and not that important. But the point is that what I found is that there were competing bills in Tallahassee, and the home builders wanted one thing, the League of Cities wanted something else, and I in my naivete, I was naive, and I talked to legislators like, oh, we'll kill that bill, we'll kill this other bill, and I'm like, this is like, why don't these people just work together? And I say I'm naive because I didn't know that actually there was a lot of animosity, a lot of not getting along between some of these groups. For instance, like the home builders with local governments. The home builders felt like local governments were the ones that were making housing unaffordable with their rules and regulations and their fees and so on. So the way I was able to bring all these people together, I want to be perfectly honest with you, is because they had no idea who I was. I just got to town. They didn't know why in the world 1,000 Friends of Florida was asking them to come to a meeting about housing, because they thought my organization was like an environmental organization. And so they all just came to the meeting, right? And I just brought all these people together who, one person would say to me, like I was actually from the city of Tampa, said, oh, are you having so-and-so at this meeting, and from Florida Catholic Conference? And I said, I don't know her. It was Rosemary Gallagher. And she said, you don't know Rosemary Gallagher? And, what's the matter with you? And so I said, okay, well, give me her phone number. I'll call Rosemary Gallagher. This was actually before we had emailing and everything. This is in 1991. Anyway, so long story short, what I really did was I brought people together and had them sit down in the same room. And then they just rolled up their sleeves, and we started hammering out what we're going to call a compromise bill, because not everybody got everything they wanted, but everybody got something that they needed. And what we did was we created a dedicated revenue source for affordable housing for the state of Florida that would go partly to the state, the housing finance agency at the state for state housing programs, but mostly to local government. And we created a program called SHIP. And now most everybody knows that when you say SHIP, that you're talking about the Local Government Housing Trust Fund. And the way how are we going to get the money for this? What should be the vehicle? And it was decided that the vehicle would be the documentary stamp tax that's paid on real estate. So when you sell a house, you have to record that deed in the public records, and you pay a doc stamp. Well, back in 1991, you would pay 60 cents per 100. So you take the purchase price, divide by 100, multiply by 0.60, and that was the doc stamp that was paid into the clerk of the court. When the Sadowski Act passed in 1992, that now was 70 cents. So now you would go to record a deed in 92, and every year thereafter until now, we still have that 70 cents per 100 in documentary stamp tax, and that dime is dedicated to the state and local housing trust funds. And it's a little complicated, but there's also, as Commissioner Ortiz said, 20 cents, because there's also in 1995 an additional 10 cents came in. But that's in the weeds. The point is, it was a wonderful source for creating a dedicated revenue for affordable housing, because there is a clear nexus between the documentary stamp taxes that are collected and the money that Floridians need to help them with their housing. Why? Because the higher price housing is, the higher the purchase price, the more doc stamps that get collected, and the higher the price housing is, the harder it is for working folks to be able to afford a home. So what does SHIP do? It provides down payment and closing cost assistance to help people to become first-time home buyers. It provides money that can be in a grant for emergency rehab for elders to stay in their homes. It could be substantial rehab. There could be a loan. It could be to harden houses and get them ready for hurricanes so that you don't have so much devastation from a hurricane. So it's very flexible. The money goes to local governments based on their population. So we wanted to make sure, this is kind of a politically, that every legislator was invested in this program. So we have a lot of counties in Florida that have very small populations. Dixie County, Liberty County, Calhoun County. So we said, okay, there's going to be a minimum amount of money. And at that time it was $250,000. Now it's $350,000. Those counties are going to get $350,000, even though their population might not even be large enough to actually bring in that much money. But you got to have enough to run a program, right? We want everybody to be invested in this. So every single one of our 67 counties gets SHIP money based on their population. Those with very small populations get $350,000. So a place like Orange County or Orlando, you've got large population. So you're talking annually about money like in the, I don't know, $10 to $15 million range, right? It's a very significant amount of money. You're talking about Broward County, Palm Beach County. You're talking $20 million a year. So we're not talking about a small amount of money here. Now, that's what we did. We put together a coalition. At that time, it was 11 statewide groups. The League of Cities, so important. League of Cities was absolutely, I mean, unbelievably important, as were the realtors and the home builders. I have to say, super important groups. And then, of course, there's the state agencies. Now, it is no longer 11 groups. It's 32 statewide organizations. And we now have thousands of what we call Sadowski affiliates. And I'm thrilled that the Hispanic Federation is one of those, because you can't be a Sadowski Coalition member unless you have a lobbyist in Tallahassee, because it's really a group of lobbyists that meet. But the affiliates are really, to be honest with you, more important than the Sadowski Coalition members in that. And I know Commissioner Ortiz will back me up on this. Legislators care more about what their constituents have to say than what a lobbyist in Tallahassee has to say. So it's really important. All politics are local. And the more we can get people in their community meeting with their legislators, the better. So, yes.
I just wanted to say, listening to from the beginning when you began and all the way to where you are now, I don't know if you're aware, but you are actually a natural organizer. Like that is literally what a grassroots organizer does, is bring people together and have them hash it out and come up with a consensus moving forward on an issue. So yeah. I'm extremely impressed with that. From someone who has been a grassroots organizer for over 6 years, I was just listening to you and I was like, you know what? That's amazing. Like, you did something, you organized something on a statewide level, and you were able to bring in all these key players into the room. And so I just wanted to commend you for that, because I mean, that is, you know, in a perfect scenario, right? That's just like a dream for a grassroots organizer to be able to do that. So thank you so much for bringing all those key players together, and lots of information for our audience to digest in terms of how, you know, this fund was created and where we are, and how people, you know, can get involved. And one Okay, I just realized I was muted. Apologies. Apologies to the entire audience. I I don't know what part I left off at, but I was just saying that that I wanted to kind of go back and ask you, Jamie, because I know Commissioner Ortiz touched upon it, but since 2003, what has the Florida legislature been doing with the Sadowski Trust Fund?
Yeah, this is a sad part of the story. So I just gave you the happy part of the story, right?
Okay.
So here's the sad part of the story. So from the time the act was created in 1992, we really didn't even meet, Maria. There was like no lobbying that needed to be done because we created a dedicated revenue source, right? So the money would come in, it's collected, like I explained, when the doc stamps are paid, and then it would go out, and the legislature would what's called appropriate. They appropriate fund. There's a budget bill every year, and then the money would just go out, and it would go on that population-based formula that I told you. So for the first 10 years, from 1992 to 2002, it just was what it was supposed to be, right? It was like, okay, we've got a dedicated revenue source. Well, all that changed after that. There was to be honest with you, it was somebody in the governor's office thought, gosh, look at all this money in the housing trust fund, and look at the Sadowski coalition. Don't they think a lot of themselves? If we can take that money, break up that coalition, we could probably get rid of all the trust funds and have all this money for the legislature to do with whatever they want to do with it. And so there was a diversion, a sweep, a raid, whatever you want to call it. They started taking the trust fund money and putting it into general revenue. It was like, what? I mean, the realtors and the home builders didn't agree to tax their industries, which is how they looked at that doc stamp increase, to put the money in general revenue. I mean, if they had suggested that back in 1992, the legislature would never have passed that bill. They weren't going to raise taxes. They were only increasing the doc stamp because it was going in this lockbox, this trust fund for affordable housing. But I'm sorry to report that the raids since 2003 have been so significant that it's over $2 billion that has been swept from the trust funds into general revenue, over $2 billion. That is in no small part what puts us into the housing crisis that we have, because that money was lost from housing and it was lost from our economy. So that's why a couple of years ago, a movement started, and we have it moving quite well right now in the Senate. We have a bill called Stop the Sweeps. And Maria, do you want me to talk about that now? Or
I was going to ask Commissioner Ortiz to help the audience out, because there are some technical terms that perhaps people know at home. If Commissioner Ortiz, I know he has experience in having programs with Civics 101. So what exactly is the general revenue that Jamie was talking about? If you could maybe go into that and kind of explain to the audience why they're moving the funds to the general revenue, and then what are sweeps? Defining what sweeps are, and as it relates to the Sadowski funds.
Well, the general revenue in a municipality and at the state level is the money that is compiled from different resources, right? In order to pay for the services. For the services in a municipality, we pay for the public works, we pay for the police, we pay for the firefighters, all these public services that you are given, that you are serviced with, of course, and it's paid with the money from the general revenue. Now, we have, and in this particular case, we have certain funds or certain allocations for a particular project that we know is of most importance, and you should not, the money that you allocate to that particular project or whatnot, it should never be diverted. It should never be taken out of that particular fund for anything else. So that's why you want to separate it from the general fund, because in the general fund is where the money, the majority of the revenues of the state go to in order to be utilized for different funding, for schools, for transportation, for anything that to pay for all the services that the state provides. Now, keep in mind that we live in a decentralized type of government, which a municipality has their own criteria, and they pay from their own general fund. The counties do the same thing. The school boards, they all have different revenues that come to their particular types of government, and the state does the same thing. Now, counties withdraw and cities do withdraw monies from or get monies from the state also. So that's why their general fund is as thick as we like to think that it is anyhow. But in this particular case, as Ms. Ross is talking about, these were monies that were allocated directly and just particularly to a fund that has to do with housing, because in many instances, and we cannot bargain, we cannot allow for the legislature to play around with this, because we have a change on legislators every so often, and it depends on what mindset a legislator may come with, and we don't want to risk, we don't want to bargain with the fact that a legislator might have in mind to use monies from the general fund to something else that may not be of the same importance as of something like housing. Housing and transportation are possibly one of the most important items in a government budget, in addition to safety, of course, law enforcement and firefighters and health, but this one's in particular to provide a home, to provide a place for somebody to lay their head. So that's why, I can say enough how wise this was, and Ms. Ross, I can stop giving you kudos for leading the efforts on this. Very smart, very wisely, they created that fund, the Sadowski Fund, for the legislature not to come over and mess with those monies that should be, and that was the intention, to be allocated just for housing. But as she said, they come and sweep them. They come over, and like years ago when the crisis down in a school down south, they took some of that money. Every time they feel that they're short, and I say they feel in quotes, because the problem is sometimes they allocate fundings in a hurry to other particular items, and then they're left out with a small amount in order to cover for the rest of their expenses, and that's when they dig into funds like the Sadowski Fund. And this happens also, and we will discuss this further, because the Sadowski Fund is not included in the Constitution. Therefore, they have the ability to dig into this fund, take those monies and allocate it to other purposes that they may have. So the second term has to do with that, with them taking those fundings.
So Commissioner Ortiz, that being said, how can the local government partner with nonprofits and coalition in addressing the needs of affordable housing in the state of Florida? Like, what is it that that elected officials can do in addressing the housing needs for working families?
Thank you for that question. I was waiting impatiently for that one. Because we came up with a particular initiative this year, as you very well said, is called Building Stronger Cities. And in Building Stronger Cities, what we're trying to do is, mind you, that over 70% of our population in the state rarely gets involved with government and know what's going on. We elect somebody because they look pretty, they speak pretty. We elect them. Sometimes we don't know if that person has the right background to represent us. And in many occasions, those representing us, forget that that's their job, representing, not dictating. But for the past X amount of years in Tallahassee, although we have great legislators, and let's make a point about that, we do have great legislators that are listening to their constituency, and they're listening to local elected officials. But the majority of them, in many instances, they don't have the experience. They never work at the local level. They don't keep in touch with those who elected them, and much less with those at the local level who can direct them and what would be best in terms of legislations. And the public, we have to sustain a family, we have to work, we have to do all these different things. So rarely we also keep tabs of what those legislators we put in office are doing. 2 years or 4 years later, they come back and they tell you, I did this, I did that, and how you do the checks and balances, right? So the Florida League of Cities, our campaign is about teaching our constituency, our residents in the state, how to get involved. It doesn't take that much. And we're giving them tools. We're giving them specific sites like Building Stronger Cities, like the Florida League of Cities site also, where you can go and see what kind of bills are the priority bills that will be brought up to the legislature this year that are good for your municipalities. And what we're watching is to make sure that those who are representing us at the state level are doing what you're asking them to do. They're voting for those bills that are going to benefit your municipality. The issue we have is in many instances, they also go to Tallahassee and they follow the leadership of that particular House or the Senate, instead of following the leadership of those who put them in place, or the leadership of those local elected officials that can tell them best how things are going in that municipality and what kind of needs we have at those municipalities. So what we're trying to do here is, first of all, organize our communities, right? After that, empowering them with the knowledge of what are the legislations that have to be dealt with in Tallahassee, empowering with the knowledge on how to approach those legislators, which is very simple. 5 minutes of your time, a call to each, your representative and your senator, and tell them, I want you to vote for this particular bills that will be empowering, will be helping our communities in different aspects. Housing, in this particular case, the Sadowski Fund, and there's a particular bill, I think it's Bill 13, House Bill 13, that addresses the issues of housing. And just like so, then at the end of the legislative session, we are providing, the Florida League of Cities is providing what is called a legislative summary, where you get to see how those legislators voted on each one of these bills. At that point in time, you will see if what you ask them to do, if they comply with that, if they're representing you and your community as your community is asking for them to represent you. And if they are, fine and dandy, that's great, that's what we want. But if they're not, that's a time when you have to make a decision to see if you want to continue having somebody who's not doing what you ask him to do in Tallahassee or Washington, for that matter.
That's a great tool for people to definitely tune into in terms of getting to see, you know, where their legislators' values are. There's something that I've always that I have learned in my past as an organizer, and someone has taught me, is that if you want to understand the values of a city, you look at the budget. Or if you want to understand the values of your local government, look at their priorities by the way they spend the money in that municipality or in your government. And it's a great way to see, you know, and also look at how people are voting as well on an issue, you know, something that people are passionate about. I wanted to ask Jamie, kind of to similar to what I asked Commissioner Ortiz, how can local government and nonprofits work together in addressing the affordable housing? Because I know you said that you're connected with the League of Cities. Like, how is it that your organization works with the League of Cities, and how can people become affiliates, for example, in your organization? If you can maybe touch.
Well, now, actually, my organization, like my day job, I'm the CEO of the Florida Housing Coalition, as you said in my intro. We do training and technical assistance. We're not an advocacy organization. The truth is, and I became the executive director or the CEO in 2015. I started facilitating the Sadowski Coalition in my old job at Thousand Friends of Florida. And so that just sort of went with me, if I could explain that. So in my day job, the Florida Housing Coalition, nonprofits, we're working with nonprofits every day of the week. We're building capacity of nonprofits. We're helping nonprofits and local governments work together to actually build housing, right? Teaching them what are the resources that are available, how do you access them, how do you actually get more housing developed. Okay, so that's one thing. And then nonprofits from an advocacy standpoint, I think what Commissioner Ortiz said was excellent. Getting and I'm going to look at that site because everybody, whether you're with a nonprofit organization or you're just an individual who cares, folks a lot of times are intimidated about meeting with their local elected officials or their state elected officials and think that maybe they have to be an expert. And I imagine that one of the things that you learn when you go to the site that Commissioner Ortiz is talking about is that's just not the case. You just need to talk with them about why you care about this issue. And you can always, if they ask you a question, say, I'll give you that, and you like me, and you get the. So it's really important for advocates to know they don't have to be experts. They're not expected to be experts. Also, I'd like to say that you oftentimes may have trouble, especially as, like, for instance, at the state level, as the legislative session is about to get started on March 2nd. Getting an appointment, even with your own legislator, can be very difficult once session is started. So the best time to meet with your legislator is actually when it's not session. So during the summer, when it's not session. But the person that you can typically meet with pretty much any time is an aide. And I think sometimes nonprofits or other advocates think that they need to talk to the legislator, and they really don't. Talking to a legislative aide can be even better than talking to a legislator because they will give you more time, and you'll give them the information that you want passed along to the elected official, and they will pass that information along. So I know in the past when I've talked to people about advocating for Sadowski funds, and I remember one person in particular, and it happened to be a lawyer, got back to me and said, oh, I couldn't get an appointment. And they said they wanted to know if I wanted to meet with the aide. And I said, no, I don't want to meet with the aide. And I thought, oh, my goodness. Yes, you do. You want to meet with the aide. So that's a very important thing for nonprofits.
And the aides are usually the ones that actually study, research, and do all the background work in terms of understanding the bills and what's in the language and things like that. And they then convey that information to the representative or the senator. So actually the legislative aide want to be really good friends with the legislative aides, because they're the gatekeepers essentially.
Yes. You have nailed it. You totally nailed it, Maria. That is exactly right. Sometimes I almost prefer to meet with the aide.
So I guess we're kind of touching into effective strategies of what we're kind of discussing. I wanted to ask Commissioner Ortiz, because what are some of the effective strategies that everyday Floridians can deploy to advocate more, for more affordable housing options in the state of Florida?
Well, let me start by backing up a little bit, because Ms. Ross says something very important in terms of the monies that have been allocated, and this guy's sweeping the monies away. Just to give you an idea of what's been happening in the city of Orlando, we're supposed to receive, based on our population, anywhere from $3.4 to $3.5 million. Mm-hmm. And in the past years, I can go back to the past 5 years. 5 years ago, I think we received a little bit over $1 million. The second year, a little bit over $1 million. The third year was 340-something thousand. The fourth year, about 40-something thousand again. Last year, zero. Blank, zero. And then when people come to us and they said, how come you guys are not allocating more funding to housing? We're grabbing from whatever we can. We get from the federal government, we did what is called Community Development Block Grant money. And we allocate these monies. We're trying to see how we can balance the equation with those monies, since the Sadowski Fund is not getting here. And just to give you an idea, with $10 million in the city of Orlando, we could build 25 new infill homes for sale on vacant lots, fully rehabilitate 25 owner-occupied homes, provide down payment assistance for 20 new home buyers, and rehabilitate 50 rental units. That's only with $20 million. And I can go on and on with 20 and 30. But if the funds is not there, our community suffers. And the funny thing is, this is money that belongs to the people. And the people should be having a say on this, but those guys are not listening. And that's why, and I was just talking to Ms. Ross before, in terms of us coming together and attempting one more time to make this Sadowski Fund constitutional. So how could people come together? First of all, they need to know how government works. A lot of people, especially we have a lot of people moving from other countries, they need to understand that we live in a government that is a decentralized government, that every municipality in the state have different ways of doing things, every county, every school board, and that is imperative that they know who represents them. You know, it's imperative that they know who their commissioner is, who their mayor is, who their state representative in the House, and who their state senator is. And of course, the same thing in Congress. But Congress, the senators is a lot easier. There's only 2 for the state, but they should know who the congressman in the House is. So once they know this, as I said before, get to know what the legislative priorities are in this particular case. I mean, you can go and see what other legislations are being played with, or what's going on with the police, what's going on with housing, with transportation. But in this particular case, and almost every year for the past 7-10 years, housing is always one of the priorities. So is transportation. So what you want to do is learn what these priorities are, and then you can either call, as Ms. Ross said, that's very important. The aide knows more in terms of the, and I used to say, when Ms. Laudy, I still say it, Ms. Laudy Campo used to be my boss. And the lady who works, who is my aide now, she's my boss. Why? Because she hears from the public. She tells me what's going on. She gives you all the information. So she directs you every day. She knows, she's the one basically leading the chart, like the Matrix, telling you where to go and how to do it. So you need to go ahead and get in contact with that office. And if you cannot talk to somebody there, send an email, a couple of emails, one to your representative, one to your senator. You know, the beauty about emails is evidence. That's the beauty of emails, is
it's
evidence.
A receipt.
Exactly, that you talk to him. You know what? And the beauty of emails too is that you can copy and paste it and keep sending it every day. Every day. I want you to go ahead and I want you to vote on these things. These are important to us. Can you imagine the whole state, all the residents of the state doing that with the legislators? The influence and the power of government would be where it's supposed to be, which is on the shoulders of the people instead of the shoulders of those representing. And that's what we have lost because we're not paying attention. But if we manage, and that's why we have such a campaign, we're visiting the whole state, teaching people these aspects, I think we'll be able to make impact in Tallahassee. And those guys, and I've seen ever since we started this campaign, I've seen a lot of those legislators communicating now with the local officials to see what's going on because they know we're coming strong. And this is just going to get better. But with the Sadowski Fund, which is possibly one of the greatest legislations we have to work with, we have to make sure that we make it constitutional. And that's going to be done. There's 2 ways of doing this. Either the majority, I believe is 2/3 of the legislature voting for it, which it may not happen.
Right.
The other one is through a referendum. That one I see if all the statewide organizations that are affiliated to Ms. Ross and her organization, and us at the Florida League of Cities, with all the 2,270 legislators we have, I think we can make this happen.
That's amazing. And real quick for the audience, what is a referendum, Commissioner?
I'm sorry, I appreciate that. Referendum is when people, it's just like when we had a couple of years ago for the $25,000 extra exemption, house exemption, is something that is everybody in the state, well, everybody that is willing to vote and is of age to vote, come over and they express their opinion through a ballot.
It'll be on a ballot?
It's going to be on the ballot.
Okay.
And then people decide, and of course, you need, in certain cases, depending what is being placed on the ballot, you may need a 50 plus or a 60 plus in order to go ahead and have the referendum, the particular legislation to pass. But once that is passed, the legislature cannot come over and say, no, we can continue doing this, because now is the will of the people by the people. It's been expressed in the ballot. Yes. So.
Thank you so much for that, Commissioner. Jamie, I wanted to come back to you and ask, how can Floridians constituents, how can they advocate for affordable housing? How can Florida's constituents advocate for affordable housing, particularly with this bill that is tied to the Sadowski funds? It's HB
to the Sadowski. Yeah. So it's really I'd like to ask everyone to go to the sadowskicoalition.org website. That's where we have all of our resources. But Maria, anybody who is on tonight, or anybody who wants to either be active or just keep informed, all they would have to do is send an email to Wells, WELLS, at flhousing.org. If you could put that up there, Wells, WELLS, at flhousing.org. Then you can just put in the subject line Sadowski or trust funds, and you will get on the email list. Yes, thank you. You'll get on the email list, and you'll know when we do webinars. I do them with a couple of other people. Everything's free. Keep people up to date, tell you, okay, what's happening, who needs to be contacted. Also, if you're on that list, you'll get alerts, but we're very careful about not sending out many alerts. We'd never ask people to do something unless we think it's going to make a difference. So if you do ever get, hey, it's time to act, an action alert, then it really will make a difference. Okay, so because we don't, because sometimes
it's
people
like the
say,
bat signal.
If they
receive
the red phone,
they receive an email, it's the bat signal. It's like, hey guys, act.
Yes. And I promise you, we do. In fact, we do it so little that we get criticized. Like, how come you didn't tell us, to call so-and-so? And it's because we knew it wouldn't have made a difference. Okay. So we really only do it if it's going to make a difference. So what everybody can do just regularly is, find your legislator, and we have a thing on our website shows you, if you don't know how to find your legislator, how to find your legislator. And do what you just said, do what Commissioner Ortiz just said, is send them an email. Right now, there are 2 Stop the Sweeps bills. And what they do, Commissioner Ortiz mentioned the Transportation Trust Fund. I'm glad he did, because what these 2 bills do, these identical bills, one is in the Senate, it's Senate Bill 510. The other is the House Bill 13. What they do is they take the Sadowski Trust Fund and they elevate it to the same level as the Transportation Trust Fund. Because right now, the reason it's too easy for the legislature to sweep the trust funds, it's just so easy. If you want to sweep the Transportation Trust Funds, you'd have to go through a whole nother hoop, and you'd have to have in the bill, you'd have to have notwithstanding this certain statute. They have done that to the Transportation Trust Fund after, I think it was Hurricane Irma. So in an emergency, when they really need more revenue, they can take the trust funds that are at that level. But very rarely is it done. So if we could get Senate Bill 510 and House Bill 13 to pass, we would really be stopping the sweeps. That's why they are called the Stop the Sweeps bills. And I want to tell you that just today I testified in the Senate Finance and Tax Committee, and the bill passed unanimously out of that committee. It's already passed out of its first committee stop, which was Senate Community Affairs. That means it's now going to be going to its last committee stop, which is Senate Appropriations. The House bill has not gotten its first hearing. And I think it's important for folks to know this. There's a huge difference between the Senate and the House in Florida. The Senate has been really good on affordable housing for many years, and so is Governor DeSantis. Ever since Governor DeSantis came into office, he's put in his budget using all the housing trust funds for housing, which is very different. It's the opposite of his predecessor, Rick Scott. He basically would do a proposed budget that put nothing in for housing. It was ridiculous. Governor DeSantis has done just the opposite. The Senate has always been good. The problem always is in the House. So right now we have Representative Killebrew, who is a Republican from Polk County, who is the sponsor of House Bill 13, and he is not getting his bill heard. So the most important thing would be to ask that his bill be heard and to ask your legislator to co-sponsor, especially if it is a Republican legislator, because it's very partisan in the House. And also getting back to something that Commissioner Ortiz touched on, which is leadership and what they do when they go up to Tallahassee and how they say one thing when they're running for office and maybe do something else when they get to Tallahassee. In the House, different from the Senate, they don't really do what they say they're going to do. They do what leadership tells them to do. And this is basically on the Republican side, because the House is controlled by the Speaker, and it's been, Republican controlled for as long as I can remember. And with Speaker Oliva, he was we call it libertarian. He didn't really think that government had any business doing anything with housing. It's very difficult. In his last session, which was in 2020, he finally agreed with the Senate President, who was Senator President Galvano, and they put all the housing trust funds in for housing, no sweep, first time
And
since
this was in
2003.
2020. This was in
Yes,
2020. There
ma'am.
was no sweep.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
fantastic.
There was no sweep, so we would have been celebrating. But remember what Commissioner Ortiz said. They got nothing in Orlando in 2020. You know why? Because the first year, all the money got appropriated, COVID hit. And
Oh,
the governor,
I remember reading that.
the
I
governor
remember,
did a line item veto. Our governor, who is supportive of housing, did a line item veto because of COVID. Because the federal money was coming in, it was like, oh, we're going to need this, and we got federal money, and you can use that. It's very important, if you're talking to legislators, that they understand the federal money is very important, but it does not take the place of the Sadowski money. It cannot do any of the things that SHIP do. SHIP can do things that it does. SHIP can help pay rent. SHIP is going to help people, keep them from being homeless. But you cannot use the federal money for anything other than helping people to not get evicted. And that's a very important thing, but it doesn't build housing, doesn't repair housing, and it's only related to COVID. Okay? So it's very important. So, and that's also why I would like to tell everyone who's listening and is going to be talking to legislators, if you get any kind of pushback like that, oh, well, there's all this federal money coming in. If you're not sure what to say, that just give us that information. It's really important that you talk to the aides or the legislators, but what's just as important? That you give feedback, that you tell someone like me, what did they say when you met with them? So that we can follow up. It's very important. The feedback is so important.
Thank you so much, Jamie and Commissioner Ortiz. Really, both of you have been just a wealth of information tonight. I've learned, I hope the audience has learned, I know certainly I have learned a lot in terms of the housing crisis here in Central Florida, and in terms of housing specifically, with the Sadowski Trust Fund, and it's amazing. What one discovers when they start reading and doing research, and then you realize, wow, this is the reason why people can't find housing in Florida, or there's not enough units, or there, and also they can't afford to purchase the homes that are available in the state of Florida because of the prices. So thank you so much, both of you. Really, truly, it's an honor. And I just wanted to also thank our audience tonight for participating and being here with us in this conversation, learning about the Sadowski Trust Fund and housing advocacy. Hispanic Federation continues to advocate for affordable housing here in the state of Florida. And part of that advocacy is to bring to light new information pertaining to any legislation that addresses housing. So if you are in support of House Bill 13, stopping the sweeps, as Jamie and Commissioner Ortiz were talking about, stopping the sweeps on the Sadowski funds, then contact your local Florida representative. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Have a good night, and we will see you again shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.